You got it? Did it have you accepted on your end?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. So I want to welcome you today, Shirlee Williams. I'm going to read your bio because I absolutely love it. Shirlee is pure magic, a beacon of transformation for women over 40, blending yoga, breathwork, meditation, and life coaching into an extraordinary tapestry of personal growth. With a touch of mystical wonder, a foundation in science, and a wealth of life experience, Shirlee is dedicated to helping women unlock their fullest, most authentic lives. Her sacred space is a sanctuary where limiting beliefs, negative self talk, and self doubt are gently released, allowing true potential to surface. Believing that everyone deserves an extraordinary life, Shirlee integrates spiritual wisdom, intuitive guidance, and practical strategies, empowering women to uncover the answers that reside deep within. She is the host of Becoming You, Real Conversations for Living Your Most Extraordinary Life, and has started to share her teaching on a YouTube channel, Shirlee Williams Living. Shirlee, I love that. Like, you are my people. That speaks to me in every single word. When I read
Oh,
it, I
thank
was so
you.
excited to do this interview today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I tell us how you got started on all of this.
Oh, how much time do we have?
However much time we need.
Okay.
However much time.
So I guess my spiritual journey started when I was about 18. I was suffering from anxiety and I went to see my family doctor. Like any good mother took me, and she wanted to put me on anti-anxiety medication. It was actually my mom who said, "Would you try yoga with me?" That was like really like
Wow.
where that started. And I don't know, my mom has passed away many years ago. She died quite young. And so I don't know what led her to ask that question, but I found myself like in the basement of some woman's house on a brown shag carpet with, you know, eight other, I'm going to say old women, but probably our age now,
Yeah,
probably
probably.
younger than our age. Um, and I started to really explore yoga, meditation, breath work, and it was my mom who introduced it to me. And I was such a curious child, anyways. Um, and then I started to like venture away from that group and found, younger people doing yoga, and I would explore like the physical practice, like the asana practice of it, which then led me to opening event. I first started opening a children's yoga studio. So I have twin boys that were born quite premature actually, and one of them has cerebral palsy. And my background was special ed, and so I'm a real believer that everything happens in the order that it's supposed to for us to transform. And I loved yoga. It really on so many levels saved my life. And then I had this like passion and love for children with special needs, and then I had my own child with special needs. So I
Wow.
went off to discover like alternative treatment for children with cerebral palsy. And I found a woman in the States who was teaching a program called Yoga for the Special Child. And that's like
Wow.
really the first level entry into like teacher training, yoga, working with kids with special needs. I had a child with special needs. And so you start to like weave the tapestry of your life together. And I came back and I started working in treatment centers and with my son. And then I was like, I'm going to take a regular yoga teacher training program to work with everybody. And then I did that. And that teacher became a real mentor for me. And she really inspired me to keep going. And then I started teaching yoga. And then I left the children of special needs world and just started focusing on teaching yoga. And through my yoga class, I would always set these incredible life intentions. And I recently found an old business card of mine that it said yoga for the real world, Shirlee Williams. And it must have been like, I'm going to say it was probably early 2000s, that business card. So,
Wow. You
and I thought
manifested.
and it really is true. It's really what I teach. And I love the idea of life and yoga because conversation is great, but how do we go off and embody the practices that we're really talking about, living your most extraordinary life. And we deserve to take up space in the world, and women need to be seen and shine their light and speak their truth. And then we would get on the yoga mat, or I would get on the yoga mat, and it was like a time for me to like integrate what really mattered to me. Like, why did this really matter? Why, how do I shine my light? What's my truth? Why am I here? Does it really matter? Like, I started to ask like the big questions, and then I would take those conversations to the classroom, like the yoga classroom, and I would ask other people these conversations, and then inevitably it just started to spill into one thing and the other, and then I started just combining yoga and life coaching. um,
Wow.
yeah, I had a studio for many, many years, like that closed in 2020 when things started to shift all over the place. And it really then gave me the freedom to like go out, explore, live in other places, you know, be away for the winter months, kind of like dabble in other things, meet more people, things like that.
Wow. So, oh, there's so much there to unpack. So, first of all, so when you would have these deep life questions, were you actually bringing them into the yoga practice with other people? Like, were you posing the question and then, like, that was kind of the intention for the class? Is
Exactly,
that how you introduced
exactly.
it?
And I
Wow.
would say like, you know, why are we here and why does it really matter? Like, let's
Mhm.
just throw that intention out. And I would say like, now we get to embody that question through the movement of yoga. And I'm using yoga. You know, it's no different. I believe that anything can be yoga if we're integrating our body, our mind, and our spirit. You know, some people will say, like, I find my answers on a long run or on a long bike ride, or, you know, my partner is an Ironman. So he bikes, he runs, he swims, he does ultra running, like endurance stuff, right? To him, that is his place to find his own answers. But I would bring these answers to the class in the studio, and then we would practice yoga together. And then, you know, once you align your body in the most optimal way where the breath is flowing easier and you start to feel better, answers come. It's like giving yourself the space to discover that.
Exactly. I was just talking about this, about how when we give ourselves that space, that just breath or this, yoga, the stretching into the areas you don't always stretch it through. It creates healing space, it creates space for God to come in, it creates space for possibility.
Right.
So, did you ever find the answer for why are we here and what's the point?
Whoa. So I really believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mhm.
One of the greatest yoga teachings is that the universe is one, uni, right? Like it's one. And in order to experience life fully, it creates each and every one of us, right? Because at its oneness, you can't really, there's nothing to experience. It's just this like everywhere, right? And you can use the word God, you can use the word spirit, you can use the word universe.
Yep.
It's all interchangeable. And so I really believe that we are all connected, and our purpose is to take up space when we're in our humanness to experience life at its fullest, because that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? We're not meant to be living a mediocre, mundane life. And most of us, unfortunately, I believe are. They're stuck, whether it's like
Yeah.
their thoughts, in their bodies, in their environment. We've been told that, wherever that comes from. And so my purpose is to shine as much light as I can. When I'm not sharing my voice, I actually feel like I'm doing a disservice.
Wow. Well, I can imagine that most of your clients, and certainly my clients, are women who are starting to seek, starting to question, starting to ask the question, what's it all for? Why am I here? There has to be more. And you shining your light and sharing that helps those people, just like we were once, realize that those are okay questions to ask and that it's safe and there's places to do that.
Yeah, which is so important, right? Because
So important.
I mean, we're both women, like we're both working with women, but like, you know, if you were in your 30s and you asked a question to your husband, or even when you were younger and you asked a question to your parents and someone said, well, that's a stupid question, or don't be stupid, or why are you asking? Like I was told all the time, like, well, that's a stupid question. My mother used to say to me, I would always say, like, but why? Why? Why
Oh
am
my
I here?
gosh. Yes.
Why? And my mother used to say, because why is a crooked letter? And I would go off going, why is a crooked letter? And then I would like think about it. I would come back and be like, no, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. You sound like me. I always had the question, always the questions, not just your typical why, but also,
Right.
well, what's it like after we die? What is forever? What if I don't want to live forever? Like
I mean,
all of that.
right? I remember being like, I must have been like 4 or 5 sitting on the bathroom counter staring in the mirror. And my mother came in and asked what I was looking at. And I said, do you see me the way I see me? And she's
Oh,
like,
wow.
well, what does that question mean? I'm like, there's my reflection. Do you see the same? Like, am I the same? And we got into this whole like, well, I see you and you're beautiful. And I was like, that's not the right, like, I knew in my body, I didn't, like, what I was seeing was different than what she was seeing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then
Oh,
as I got older, I realized being in relationship was really the mirror,
oh yeah.
right? Like,
Oh
you
my
really see
gosh.
yourself when you're in relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I like as soon as my husband and I got married, I was like, what? Like, how did things change all of a sudden? He's he frustrates the heck out of me. But like the more work that I've been doing, yoga, meditation, breath work, all the things, all of a sudden he's such a nicer person.
Right? Because
Which is
we've
sad
changed.
too, right?
You
Exactly.
know, it's like
Exactly.
I don't know how it goes for you when you're coaching women, but a lot of times like I'll get on calls and like all they're doing is like telling me the story of what their husband did to upset them or something that happened outside of themselves. And I'm constantly trying to get them to look at themselves because we can't change anybody around us. The
Right.
only work that needs to be done, and then I always hear like, but wait, it's not fair. I'm going to do all the work. Yes, you're going to do your work. And by changing your behavior, the people around you start to change. Nothing else actually has to happen.
It's so amazing.
It's
And
right.
if we could change other people when we were still in our wounding and, trauma and all the issues that we have, can you imagine how the world would be? I'm always grateful that my husband isn't complaining about me as much as I'm complaining about him, right?
Right?
Yeah, that's so incredible. So with yoga, there's, 8 different limbs of yoga. Are you practicing all of that and bringing it all in? Or, so many people in the Western world think of yoga as just the physical asanas.
Yeah, such a beautiful question. I do it sneaking. Like I don't say we're going to study the 8 limbs of yoga, but
Mhm.
I bring all the components in as much as I can. I mean, these days people are like, can we do a 45-minute flow? Can we do, like is there a quick class that I can come to? When I used to practice, they were 2-hour practices. So primarily I try and teach a 75-minute class, which is as long as I can keep people around. Which is why I love retreat and stuff because we can really immerse ourselves and we can focus and interweave all of it. But in every class, I have asana practice, I do breath, I do meditation,
Nice.
you know, and I'll talk about the other limbs. I'll bring in, some of the spiritual teachings as themes also, right? Like we've done the chakra series, we've done the yamas and niyamas, which are like rules of engagement for life, let's say, self-engagement and engagement with others. And so I will bring in spiritual context into it. I love to read. I have some favorite books that I like to bring in. I teach yoga teacher training. So I
Nice.
try and like bring in some of the ancient teachings because I don't want it to get too watered down. I think there's a lot of watering it down.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that going back to the basics and the fundamental and really having reverence for how it started is important and
Uh,
impactful,
yeah.
really impactful. I did see on your Instagram several posts of you doing inversions, and I was so jealous. I have my YTT 200.
Oh,
I don't do it
beautiful.
regularly. Yeah, I love it. That's a whole process I'll have to tell you about. I
Yes.
started that process when I was like 27 or 28, and then finished it when I was in my early 40s. So
Good
I
for
redid it,
you.
but I always wanted to do that. But yeah, so I saw you doing inversions, and I now, when I was a kid, I was always doing stuff like that, always flipping around and upside down. And today, as a over 40 woman, I don't trust myself so much. I think it's gonna hurt.
Yeah. It's one of the, I love turning things upside down. I think we get a really different perspective of things when
Yeah.
we're looking at them from upside down. But I find things like handstands in particular to be so empowering. And so let's just say, go back to the theming of classes. This is why the life in yoga works so well for me. I might teach a class on strength, and handstands might be what I call like the apex pose, like the pose that we're going to work towards. And then women hear handstands, and most of the women that show up in my classes are also over 40. And I give them a safe environment, and I tell them, trust me, you're not going to fall on your head, and I'm not going to let you fall over. And I give them really great techniques. It's such an empowering
Oh yeah.
pose, right? People come down and they're like, oh my God, I haven't done that since I'm like 6 years old, right? And the other part of that is, I don't know about you, but people have forgotten how to play,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like they're like, well, how do I practice this at home? And I'm like, go on the grass or get on a beach where it's like cushy and sandy or grassy and comfy, and kick up and practice like tumbling over or practice with a friend, like, but it's like anything in life. If we have to practice things.
Yeah. Just talking about it sounds fun. But don't you think that it is like we've lost that sense of playfulness because we're always so worried about what other people think of us? Always so worried about the projection, right? And so God forbid I try to kick up into a handstand and I fall. Right?
Right, right, right. What will everyone laugh? I had a woman in my class. Started coming to me when she was like, I want to say she was in her early 70s. And she came to a class. And at the beginning I always say, like, is there any injuries, or does anyone need to tell me anything? And so people share like, oh, I have a shoulder or whatever. But this woman said, I have a pacemaker. And I said, okay, great, thank you. And then we did handstands. 70 years old. She got up, and then she's like, that was really fun. I'm going to check with my cardiologist. And I said, okay. Because she said, can I do a handstand? I said, well, let's try. She's like, I know, but I have a pacemaker. I said, well, as long as it's working, like I'm assuming we're
Yeah.
going to be okay. So she went to the cardiologist and she said to him, so I'm taking yoga again. I'm feeling really good, but can I do handstands? And he said, oh, I don't know. Can you? And she's like, no, like, is it safe? And he's like, you can do whatever you can do. Like, your pacemaker is key. It's good.
Yeah.
And she came back, and every week she'd be like, can we do handstands again this week?
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Seven.
that's inspiring. I'm gonna try that
There
now.
you go. Yeah, yeah,
Work
yeah.
up to it. My kids will love it too.
Right?
Oh, they would love to do it.
I
That's what
love practice.
playfulness in my life.
I honestly, I love practicing poses that are like fun and inspiring. I don't know about you. I need more play in my life. I can be really serious about things.
Yes.
And before we hit record, we were talking like summer's here, it's beautiful out, but we were talking about like being bored or not having an agenda and being free to like, those are the days that I'm missing, right? And
Um,
so I want to schedule more play in my life.
it's so important. And what we had, one thing that I had talked about, which I think is important for people to hear, is like through this journey, um, anxiety was my base level emotion for the past 40 years, probably. I mean, as long as I can remember, even as a child. And I think that that is pretty common in the Western world.
especially these
The
days.
world we live in, especially the faster it gets, like you said, you can't keep people's attention for more than 75 minutes in a yoga class anymore.
Right.
And when you start on this path and begin to become in alignment with who you truly are and release so much of this, anxiety had a tendency to go with it, which sounds great, except for when you start realizing you're a little anxious because you're not feeling anxious. Well, it's like an addiction. You have to learn to get past it, right? And I think that's where play comes in. That's
And
where it's so important. And I have small children, so I don't need to schedule it. It's always available to me. I just need to sometimes remember to stop what I'm doing and go play with them. But I do think that you're right. I think people need to schedule it into their day.
Yeah, I have a question for you about anxiety because I
Mhm.
mean that took me to the yoga mat, but one of the things I heard you say was like I was like anxious about not feeling anxious anymore.
Mhm.
Like, how did you know that things needed to change? Like, was there a diff-
Originally, well, I mean, my children are all adopted because I couldn't have children. I had early menopause, was diagnosed when I was 35, and I am
wow,
sure that it started when I was about 28 years old. And the doctors just wouldn't test it. They're like, "Oh no, it's fine. You just have a regularly irregular period." And I just was constantly always running from myself. I had, childhood sexual trauma um, when I was 4 and 5, and that led into so many things, and well, I share my story. It led into abortion. It led into, promiscuity, drugs and alcohol. In my 20s, I was partying, working. I was a workaholic for sure, or I was running marathons.
wow,
So it was just
yeah.
this constant. I had adrenal fatigue.
What were you running from, right?
Well, I was running from myself. I
Yeah,
felt like, I think people that have trauma at such an early age, their underlying emotion tends to be shame. And so you feel like I felt like I was labeled and everyone could tell, the same stuff that the abuser told me when I was a child. If you tell anyone, they're going to know that you're a bad girl. And
right,
so I embodied that. And my whole life thought I was a bad person. And so I was constantly running from this and
right.
counseling and, therapy and working with pastors, all of it helped, but that trauma gets embodied, it sinks
Yeah.
into your cells, and it's in your cells, and like almost in your
Yeah.
DNA. It's so far in there that when you hear the things and you do the prayers, like all of that stuff helps, but you've got to do something to create that space to release it from your physical body, which
Mm,
is why I love, yoga, breath work, even plant medicine ceremony. All of that stuff
uh,
helps to get into the cells and create that space that needs to be created. But so the big red flag for me when I realized I needed to change was when I, found out I couldn't have children. Now, the interesting thing, we also talked about how the world, the universe just tends to line up for you when you're in alignment. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to adopt or be a foster parent. And all of a sudden, my dream was becoming a reality. Now, that
right.
didn't make it any easier at the moment, because I felt like I was broken. I was like, women are designed to be this portal that creates life. I didn't think of it back then. I thought of it like I hated all that stuff,
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
been abused so early on. But all of a sudden, I couldn't do that. And I didn't feel like I was a whole person at the time, a whole woman. And so that kind of started this whole catalyst. I adopted my first daughter, adopted the second one. After the second one, I had, major like postpartum. Even though I'm the adoptive
Yeah,
mom, you
yeah,
still have hormones that come because you have a
yeah.
baby there that you have to take care of. And I had major postpartum and just all of the questions like, What is the point of life? Why am I here? There has to be more.
Has to
And
be. Yeah.
started researching, and luckily I had a yoga practice, but just started deepening all of that and started researching everything I could get my hands on, from spirituality to quantum physics. I've, different religions. I was raised Christian and have read the Bible several times, and all of it, just it all, there's pieces in all of it that our truth and guide us. And kind of like you, I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity and have had the growth that I've had, that I just want to share it with other people, which is
Yeah, it's not an easy path. Like I have conversations with women and they're like, but you just make it look so easy, right? Because I do like this, let's call it an intake form. And I know I was noticing a little bit of a trend where women were like, well, I didn't really do what we talked about because it was like really hard. And then I got in my head too much. And, I was, I really believe if you don't have something that you truly want, it's two reasons. Either you haven't been working at it long enough or you don't want it badly enough. And I
yeah,
really believe that, and sometimes it's really hard for women to hear that. And I'm saying women, I know it's probably hard for men to hear that too. But if you don't have something that you don't want, you don't want it badly enough,
yeah,
And I see that in myself. Like sometimes I have this romantic idea, like, I'm going to take up a hobby. I think I'll start photography, and I go for 2 weeks and I take beautiful pictures and then I download them and I play with colors and then I don't touch it again. Well, clearly I didn't want that hobby bad enough. Otherwise, I would have made time for it, you
yeah.
know?
I'm always talking to my girls about this. They're 8 and 10, 8.5, 10.5 right now. And we're working on that. My oldest daughter says, so we homeschool too. She says, if I finish this one course, would you get me a Nintendo or Xbox or something? I said, if you finish it by December, I will. And she's like, never mind.
Right?
Like, if that was me, I would have been like, I'll finish it tomorrow.
I would have been all over that.
So we're always working on it. But I was telling them today, like the people who achieve the most in life, where it looks easy, like it looks like they're wealthy, it looks like they're happy, it looks like they're healthy. Those people have typically overcame the most and worked the hardest to get there.
And it's a small percentage.
It is. And it's sad to me because it is a hard path, but it's not, it's worth it. It's worth but not everybody's here for that,
No, I
Not,
agree.
not
I
everyone's
agree.
here
I
for that.
agree. And I think that's what I love so much about coaching. Like when I say live a life, can I swear?
Yes, please.
Live a life. Yes, please do. Live a life that fucking lights you up. I
Yeah.
mean that, right? Because we all know what we, meaning you and I and the other people in this healing space, knows what living a mediocre life is. Like sometimes I'll get DMs from women and they're like, every morning I wake up and I go to your stories and I see what kind of inspiring thing you're going to say today, and I love the way you see the world and the way you're living, and I wish I could do that. And I'll say, wishing is where dreams go to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the
That
doing
word.
of it every day. That's why I'm so lit up about this idea of this future version work of ourselves, like really having an image of what it is that you truly desire and showing up as that version every single day until the version changes and you get ahead of yourself again.
Yes. So I want you to dive into that. The reason that I ask is I do a future self meditation where you meet your future self. It's so impactful. People ask me to record it so that they can send it to other people. But what I realized, what God, Creator God showed me, is if you always think of it as the future version of yourself, it will always be out there. It will
Yeah.
never come
Yeah.
true. And there's no discomfort there because it's like, oh, I want to be that person someday. I wish I could be that person someday.
Yeah.
However, when you realize that there's really no such thing as time, it's a construct that our minds have created to live in this reality, then you realize that you can be that person now. You
Right.
just have to make the same choices that she makes.
Right.
Just
Right.
become her.
Right. So that's if you know what that future version of yourself looks like. So you have this beautiful guided meditation of meeting the future version of yourself, and you probably attach to all the feelings about that,
Mhm.
about the future version, and you probably see what she's wearing and where she's standing, what activity is she doing, like all of those things. The second step for me is to write the dream of that. And so write it in the present tense as if it already exists, right? So you're writing what you meditated on, you're writing that version, right? Like, I am creating from this beautiful outdoor space and I have the view of the ocean. Like this is mine, right? Right? And then there's these action steps. I call them promises to ourselves. Somebody else might call them goals. But like I have 3 to 5 action steps that I take every day that align me to that. And it might be
I love
like,
that.
here's an example. In nature, I'm very masculine. I'm the doer. I like to do. And when I turned 50, I was like, I'm ready to be. But I
Mhm.
didn't know the discrepancy between doing and being felt so great that I was like, how do I be and also do? Like, because I can't just be. But I was like, the future feminine version of me, like, what would she do? Well, she would be wearing dresses.
Mm.
They might even be a different color than black. She would have her hair down and it would be long and flowy. And so I started to wear feminine dresses and I started to buy myself flowers and I started to wear my hair down and then I started to like put pink lipstick on, like, and then slowly people started like the first couple of times people were like, wow, that's a really pretty dress. And of course the limiting self little me would be like, well, does it look funny? And they're like, no, you look beautiful, right? And so I started to own it. I
Yeah.
started to wear a beautiful hat with a crystal on it, like all these things that reminded me of this wise woman that I could become, until one day I just got dressed and there she was.
I love
So
it.
these promises that we make to ourselves based on the dream, based on the vision, we're already it. We're already living it. And it's like, you know that quote, like, one day you're gonna realize you're living the dream that you set for yourself. You
Yeah.
know, like I botched that up. Don't no one write that one down. But you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
you as soon as you can see it and feel it, you can create it. It's already there. The universe, your mind doesn't know whether it's actually happening or it's something that you're visualizing for the future.
Exactly. I think the keys are the promises, that you mentioned,
Yeah.
because it's like
Yeah.
you can have a vision board, you can have the vision, but it can always be out there and happen someday, or it can happen now if you're
Right.
doing these things every
Right.
day. I love that,
You know,
Shirley.
and sometimes like a lot of people will want like abundance. They talk about abundance and then they have like this financial thing. And I'm like, but what does the money mean for you? Like let's get away from that because money is just energy, right? So
Mhm.
what does the money mean for you? And they're like, well, if I had money, I'd have freedom. Okay, so freedom is the piece we're going for. What does
Yeah.
freedom look like? Well, being able to eat in a really fancy restaurant and drive a really beautiful car and, buy the shoes that I want just because I desire them, let's say. And so I will literally say to people, well, go to the fancy restaurant, take your
Yeah.
journal, and order a glass of wine. Maybe you don't have to eat there. Maybe you just go to the fancy restaurant and order a glass of wine and sit at the bar and journal about that experience. You know, I remember like someone saying to me like, well, I want a fancy car, like a really fast, I'm never going to be able to afford that. I said, well, what if you rented that car for the day and you showed up as if? So you know, a lot of times, like, it's like, well, I can't do that. I can't take the grand vacation. What if you made a pina colada and went into your backyard?
There
Like,
you go.
right? Like, if you start to live into it, you could
It
start to
makes it
create
totally
more of
different
it.
because all of a sudden it's tangible and you can feel it and touch it and you know what it's like. We just did this. My daughters have an older sister that their birth mom raises, and her best friend just stayed with us for 12 days. We're in
Oh,
Florida. We have super open adoptions. It's awesome. I love it. I'm so grateful. But we took them over to NASA because they want to work at NASA. And so instead of doing like Disney or whatever, we took them to NASA, which they loved. And my intention was this will make it real for them. This won't just be like a pipe dream, you know, this will be like, wow, I've been there. I know what it's like. I know what it looks like. Now when they think about it, they know the road that you take to get there, you know, and that was that just like what you're saying, that was
so
my intention
beautiful.
with that.
It's
Yeah.
so beautiful. And then there is a second piece because I don't know. I think a lot of times we set ourselves up for failure or we just let ourselves down. Like it's easy to let ourselves off the hook. So I have the last piece of setting these promises. I haven't thought of a better word, but I keep asking people to help me come up with one. The second piece is consequences. And consequences are not punishments, but they're there as like second promises to ourselves to keep ourselves accountable.
Hmm.
So let's just say in my dream, I'm like, I'm going to use weight because that comes up a lot. Like, I want to lose 10 pounds, especially like in this perimenopause, menopause place, right? So I'm going to use weight as an example. So let's say they're working on this beautiful dream that they've crafted for themselves. And part of it is to live in a particular space. And the other part of the dream is to also lose weight. So maybe one of the promises is to take a drive to the house that you want to live in or like what it looks like. And then the consequences, if you don't take action on your first promise, then maybe you have to walk an extra hour at the end of the week.
Oh, that's
So there's a
good.
second accountable piece that where like for me, I love to watch Netflix. I could get lost in Netflix, but I also then it's like my default when I want to check out. And then the end of the week comes and I'm like, fuck, I didn't do the things I said I was gonna do. I had no time. This happened to me once. I was like, I had no time this week, but yet I watched like a whole season of something and there was 8 episodes for an hour. That's like 8 hours, right? Like when you
Mhm.
start to break it down that way. And so I was using Netflix as a reward. By the end of the week, if I got all my promises done that I had said to myself, and I love a checklist, I have a piece of Bristol board here with numbers and I check things off. At the end of the week, the reward was Netflix. And on
Nice.
Sunday evening, I could watch Netflix. So
Nice.
so it was like rewards, promises, consequences to stay accountable, those kinds of things.
Very cool. That is good. That is really important because it is easy to just say, "Oh, I didn't have time," you know.
You know, I
I
mean,
always I always remind myself I have as much time as Albert Einstein had, you know.
right.
Da Vinci,
And look what he
right?
did.
Yeah. Yeah, what do I have to show for it?
Come on, I heard you say you have 3 kids, the youngest is 4, and you're homeschooling.
So I hired tutor this year at this last
Okay.
like in January, and it changed our lives. They're getting so much more done and our relationship is so much better. Yeah.
But
It
how
was
cool is that you recognize that, right? Like,
well, yeah. And people always ask me when I tell people that we homeschool, people usually moms usually are interested in it, but they think it has to look a certain way and it's going to take all their time. I'm like, I have a tutor. Like, I literally check in on it a couple times a week and I know what they're getting accomplished. I can see what they're getting accomplished and then we have a day that our homeschool community gets together every week and that's that. And
I
I'm
love
like, I'm
it.
not your typical homeschool mom. It doesn't have to look a certain way. And I think that's important. Like going back to people living mundane lives instead of a life that fucking lights them up. Is I think people think it has to look a certain way. Like you said, we're so conditioned You know, I get so sick of people saying that they have to have a job for the benefits, like the health insurance. I'm like, you're in Canada, but in America, our health
Let me
insurance,
tell you,
uh,
our healthcare is broken here too.
uh,
So
it's so bad. It is so bad. But it doesn't have to look a certain way. Like,
yeah,
we moved to Florida, we homeschool. Like, we just keep saying, like, what would be awesome in our life? Like, my husband and I are older. We love to travel. We have to homeschool. Like we have 3 kids. We could either stop our life for the next 18 years and just live according to their life, which so many people do these days. And if
yes,
that is what you
yes,
love and want to do that, I'm not talking bad about it. It just wasn't for us. We weren't going to put our entire lives on hold just to send them to public school and, do all the sporting events. And so we had to figure out how it would work. And I think, and not even had to, and we got to prove that it can work a different way.
yeah. I
Eh,
love what you said about people are so stuck thinking it has to look a certain
mhm.
way. And that goes back to the conditions we've been told, the things that we're seeing around us. I really believe everything can be figured out. Like we're leaving Canada in November. People, as soon as I say that, and I haven't even said it to too many people, because the second I say it, I don't know if you've noticed this, people will tell you all the things that could go wrong
Oh
about you
yeah.
leaving the country, right? So I get questions like, oh my God, what are you going to do? Like, if you get sick, what are you going to do for healthcare? Or like, what's your job going to be? Like, what happens, if, they have hurricanes? Like, what are you going to do in rainy season? What do you? And I'm like, oh, well, we're just going to go and
Yeah.
we're going to align ourselves to what we really want and it's going to work out. And they're like, well, how do you know it's going to work out? I'm like, I don't know. But that's like, right? And so I say to them, at what point in your life did you try something that it didn't work out? And most of those people are responding from fear of
Yes.
their own story that they're telling themselves,
Yes.
you
And
know?
they're trying to protect you. They're doing it out of the
Of
kindness
course
of
they
their
are.
heart.
Of course
You
they
know,
are.
they don't realize that they're being limiting, and that's coming from their own limiting beliefs and their
Right.
own fear. When
Right.
we moved to Florida, we didn't tell anybody until we already did it. And then we told our parents because we knew that they would be like, "What are you doing? We still have businesses back in Omaha. How are you going to run your businesses?" Well, the same way we've been doing it since 2020.
Right.
No one cares if it's on Zoom or the phone. Like, we have construction and real estate businesses. I'm the broker. I'm not out selling houses.
Right.
And we actually I don't have that business anymore. We combined it with a bigger brokerage. But we have a construction company, but my husband's not the one swinging hammers. So why do we have to be there? It's conditioning. That goes back to the conditioning. People think this is how it's always been, so this is how it has to be, you
Right.
know? But like
I,
you're not the first people to move to Costa Rica.
I
They live
think
during rainy season and hurricanes and just because
right. And people get sick and there's doctors in
they're
Costa Rica and
doctors. Yeah.
we're gonna be people are like, they have poisonous snakes. I'm like, no, I know they do. We drove to Mexico from Canada a few years ago and people were like, I have a friend's cousin's uncle. He drove to Mexico once and he got stopped and they got robbed. I'm like, really? They're like, you better be really careful. I was like, and we shut all of it down. Like I don't want to be in that energy, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's like what I'm gonna get woohoo for a moment, but what frequency do you want to vibe in? Because that's what you're going to attract,
Yes. Yes.
right? So if you're coming from anxiety, fear, you're going to attract more anxiety and more fear into your world.
Yes.
Whether if you're like love and joy and trust, everything's gonna just work out. That's the frequency I want to align with.
And for me, learning that lesson, it's been so cool because literally the last year has been a big ripping off of the Band-Aid for the anxiety that I felt around financial. because this was a big move for us.
Right.
And I realized we have, we're real estate investors. We always are buying and selling properties. And we have a property that in the past I would have panicked about and, all up in a tizzy, tornado, whatever. And now I meditated on it. Even last night I meditated on it and it was like, okay, I'll give it to the universe. I trust that it'll be fine. And this morning I, for a split second, thought about picking that back up. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
why would I not trust? It's been amazing. My husband, on the other hand, has never had anxiety in a day in his life. He doesn't even know. He actually had it once and he thought he was having like a heart attack because he was like, what is this? And I was like, you're having anxiety. You'll be fine. Like, welcome to my world. But he just always thinks things would be fine. And like everything is always fine. We call him the master manifester in our office because he literally would just be like, oh, I don't have a key for this property. I'm just going to go. And somebody will be there that has a key.
Right.
Or,
Right.
it just
I
always
love that
felt
though.
that
I
way.
love that. And it's true.
It
Everything,
is.
like, this is what I keep telling people. Everything is going to be fine. We're not having a conversation here saying it's easy.
No.
We're just saying everything is going to be fine. And we've also been through heartache, and we've also had trauma, and we've also had really horrific, unimaginable things happen to us. And at the time, maybe it didn't feel fine, but like if you can start to connect the thread of your life experiences to get us to this moment, to have this conversation. Like I was listening to you talk about, you adopting because you couldn't have children, and early abuse in childhood, and early menopause, you were told you can't, and for you to think like that's what we're here for, is to like carry life in our bodies. And I'm like, so I had twins and they were conceived through in vitro, and they were born as micro preemies with like 20% chance of survival. And the doctor told me I gave birth to them because I had an incompetent cervix, incompetent, right? And so I, this whole thing of guilt around, I caused this for them, right? And then I was embarrassed by it. And then I wouldn't tell my birth story and I wouldn't talk about it. And I had all this guilt that these little babies only had 20% chance. Like there was so much healing that had to happen from that for me to, no wonder I was in my masculine. It wasn't safe for me to believe that I could be in my feminine, right? Because femininity means you're like a mother and you're going to carry these beautiful babies and you're going to have like, and so that's the stories that we were told. That's what made us mothers, or that's what, like, so for us to be able to tie the threads and connect how we got to this moment and these beautiful children that you're raising, and this open adopt, I mean, I have goosebumps when I heard you say like these open, and we looked at adopting, like, and my kids are beautiful and I ended up right here because they chose me and your children chose you. Like, it's just, so yes, when women come to me and there's sad stories and I can feel it in the depth of my heart, how much they're hurting. And I say, I know you're not ready to hear this, but it is going to be okay.
It is. And I have found that those things, those hardest things in my life, come full circle and turn out to be the biggest blessings
Right?
every single time.
Right.
There's not a hard thing that has happened that has not turned out that way.
Because everything happens in the order that it's supposed to. And the universe is not set up for us to fail, by the way.
I see the universe is always conspiring for my good.
I say that too. It's a co-participation, right?
Yeah.
And most people aren't I mean, you talked about this space thing. Most people are not carving out enough space in their bodies to actually see that it's unfolding for them.
Right.
Right? Because if you really believe everything's happening in the order that it's supposed to for us to transform, then it becomes this co-participation with the universe, and then you're not playing victim. Right? Like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. Right?
Right. Well, we get focused on our problem and it's like all we can see. It's like having blinders on and all we can
Yeah.
see is the problem. And if we can just create a little space, all of a sudden we can see more life around the problem. And the farther back we can go, the more that we realize it might just be like a little dot, on our timeline, and it is leading to something great.
When you said that, the analogy that I always think of is, have you ever watched a fly try and get out of a window? And it
Yeah.
keeps banging its head in the window. And I'm like, dude, if you just stood back, you would see the door is open on the left of you. But they're just like going right into the window. And you can hear them like bing, bing. And I'm like, over here, there's a whole door open. Go.
That's so good. I'm gonna have to borrow that.
You can use it. You can use it. It's pretty
Oh
funny.
my gosh. So I wanted to ask you, why women over 40? Why is that your target audience? And
Um,
is there something that naturally happens when we kind of reach that age where all of a sudden we stop giving so many fucks about what everybody thinks about us and we start really desiring a meaningful life that,
Yeah, I mean, I think that could happen at any age, to be
yeah,
quite honest. But
yeah.
for me, it happened to be 40. Like literally, I turned 40. I remember sitting down with my kids and my ex-husband, and I said, we all grew up skiing together, and I hated it. I hated it as a kid. And then when the kids were little, we were like, let's join this club and we'll ski because the family that skis together, there's like things to do together on the weekends. So I picked up skiing again, even though I hated it. And then when I turned 40, it was my 40th birthday, I sat them down and I'm like, okay, guys, mom just turned 40 and I'm calling it the fuck you 40s. And I'm no longer in the business of doing anything I no longer want to do. I made this like big announcement. And so one of my boys was like, well, what don't you want to do anymore? And I'm like, I'm not skiing. And they were like, neither are we. So I was like, you mean I didn't have to wait till I was 40 to make that big announcement? And honestly, I don't think anyone got back on skis after.
That is awesome. I don't have something that impactful. However, I have noticed that the more that I've set boundaries for myself around what I'm willing to do and what I'm unwilling to do has given my children the liberty to do the same thing.
Right?
Which I love because I remember like as a kid, like your kids, they didn't want to do it again, but they kept doing it because they felt
Every weekend we all went to the club
yeah.
and went on the
We're
skis.
And I think as children, especially, you feel like you don't have a voice. And when we, as the parents, model that, that gives them the ability to do the same thing. So,
Yeah. And I think it's a really valuable lesson for them. And so
yeah.
from that time on, I just really set clearer boundaries about what I was willing to do and what I wasn't willing to do. And I love the term boundaries because it doesn't keep people out. It just shows people how you deserve to be treated and what's acceptable and what's not. And then I just noticed a trend. The women that were showing up for me were women over 40 that were in some sort of transition, whether they were asking, like, what now? Or they were going through divorce, they were going through loss of parents, they were going through kids leaving for university. Like, there was like, I mean, we're always in flux and transition, but they were like in this space of like, well, now what do I do? Like, right? I mean, it sounds like you guys have a super awesome healthy balance of like travel and adventure and doing all the things, but like I know so many women, they became moms, that's the title they gave themselves, that's what they did. They stopped going on vacation, they stopped hanging out with girlfriends, they stopped
Mhm.
loving their partner up, they all the right? And they were like, I'm a mom and this is what I'm gonna do. And then these kids leave and women are like, well, I don't recognize me, I don't recognize you. That's
Yeah.
where people start to get divorced. Now the kids aren't a factor. You hear it all the time. And so I just had more women in that age group come to me and I coached a couple of, young adults in their 20s and they're still in this like victim mentality and blaming all their parents. And I was like, I don't have energy for that one. That's not for me.
Yeah.
You know,
I just talked to a woman exactly like you described, was a wife and a mother, and unexpectedly, her husband left, and she doesn't even know what kind of music she likes today,
Right.
you know?
I hear those stories all the time.
Um,
Right? And
Yeah,
I'll say, "What makes you happy?" And they're like, "I don't know." Like, I don't know. I honestly don't know what makes me happy,
I
you
can't,
know?
and I do hear that too. I do hear that too, and it always makes me sad because I know for me I was so independent. I couldn't have done that, and I'm
Yeah.
grateful because I can't imagine the life. I would be one of those women who may not make it to 50 by choice if that was the life. And I think, I mean, I think that I heard a statistic that the majority of women who actually commit suicide is in their mid 40s to early 50s when menopause starts, when the kids have left. And so then you don't know who you are, and all of a sudden your hormones are insane,
Right.
you
And you
know?
think you're dying or you're
Yep.
having a heart attack
Yep.
or, like, I mean,
You've
I
never done anything for yourself for the past 20 years, so now you
right,
don't even know how to go get a massage or go to a yoga class or reach
right.
out for help. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then they're told that they're just being sensitive and overreacting and, they go to the doctor and the doctor's not hearing them either. And then, we can have a whole other episode about menopause and postmenopause.
We'll do that. We'll have to do.
Like no one's really listening. And so women
No,
are like flailing over here and their kids are living their best life and their husbands left them and now they're like, now what
yeah.
do I do?
Yeah, we will have to do that actually though, because I believe that we are moving into an age where the femininity is rising. You
I
know,
agree.
the
I
world
agree.
is changing, and to me, that doesn't mean that women are going to come replace men in places of power in the masculine structure we have right now. I think it's going to change
Well,
to
it's
one.
so funny. We talk about this masculine, feminine. Men are doing men's groups over here, and now women are doing women's circles over here. And now we've got to come back together and figure out how to communicate. I mean, my partner and I talk about this all the time. Maybe we need to run a retreat for men and women.
You do. I was
Yeah,
just talking
you
with
know?
one of the ladies who is my partner in my retreat, and I was asking her and her husband, they both do a lot of healing. They're breathwork facilitators and shaman. And I said, please, you have to do a
Yeah.
couples one. We need it. You
Yeah,
know,
we were supposed to do one in Tuscany in
Mm,
May of
wow.
2020 when the world shut down, and so we never rebooked it after that. But we had like a sold out cycle yoga retreat in Tuscany because he's an endurance coach, and so we were going
Oh,
to combine some riding and yoga and men and women and the
oh,
whole
that would be
thing. Yeah,
amazing.
so it's still on our list. Maybe we'll do it
Do
in
it.
Costa Rica
This
now.
is your sign. So tell me about your ladies retreat that you do.
Yeah, so I run 3 retreats a year. I'm hoping to start in 2025 doing a few more. And some are local, some are international. We do Mexico, we do Costa Rica, we do Ontario, Canada. And everyone has its own theme. Like once we book the spot, we sort of feel into it. I have a retreat partner who's also Canadian but living in Costa Rica. And we do yoga, breath work, somatic movements, meditation, coaching. Some retreats we've done one-on-one coaching depending on the size. So they book in time with us. And there's contemplation time, and each one has its own little flavor. Lots of downtime, women's circles, opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, cacao. Um, we really encourage women to come on their own. Like I think there's something great about doing something with a girlfriend, but if you come with someone who already has ideas and thoughts about who you are, you don't get to show up and be who you want to be.
Oh,
So
wow.
we really encourage women to come alone. I think it's really empowering. And yeah, that's what we do. And so our next one is coming up actually next Friday, July 19th, when this is being recorded, we're a week away. And it's here in Canada. And then in 2025, we are already starting to book for April in Costa Rica.
Nice. I think I might have to join you for that one.
Oh, I would love that.
I would love it. Sounds like we do something very similar, and I love
Yeah.
do.
And so because you facilitate with other women also, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
do each of them come with their own flavor?
Yes. So we do a lot of all of the same types of stuff that you do, a little kundalini, there's intuitive massage, and then we always add something. But yeah, it always has kind of its own flavor. One of our partners is a raw vegan chef, and so she does all of the meals, and it's amazing. I'm not vegan, and when I first heard that, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna bring my partner in the retreats brought snacks in case she was hungry. And then it was so amazing that we made her a partner in it because we want her in every one of them.
Oh, I
So
love that. It's
it
funny because
totally,
when we're going next week is vegetarian, so it's not vegan.
yeah.
And I'm not a vegetarian either. I actually really love meat. And
Mhm.
so last year we brought like a whole chicken and little pepperettes that we kept in a cooler. We would like snack on some chicken breasts because I was like, I don't think I'm gonna have enough to eat.
With ours, with Kay, her name's Kaylin, we did not, we had extra. We couldn't even finish everything. It was
Oh, I
so
love vegan.
amazing and I felt good. Yeah, it was really good. But yeah, we try to do a little bit different flavor. But it's so one of the things that is important in our line of work is that when we're working with other people all the time is that we also make sure to spend our time being bored and just be
Right?
relaxing but also getting our own healing. And so finding another retreat that's impactful,
Yeah.
for somebody who's done them and leads them is not always easy. I've been to some where I'm like, I'm ready to go, like
Right.
this was not worth
This
it.
is this is our ongoing struggle, right? Because I wanna go for myself and I wanna be and I try and sign up for something once a year for myself and sometimes it literally just looks like 5 days in Miami by
Yeah,
myself, taking yoga classes, going to like finding a cacao ceremony or a breathwork session and just dabbling somewhere where I can like go back to my own space because I also find sometimes I'll get somewhere and I'm like, eh. I'm
yeah.
feeling into all the things that aren't being done well or like now I'm like here and I don't really want to be and
Well,
so
ours is in January and I promise
okay.
you will love it. It is so good.
And this one is in Arizona.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Just out the Flagstaff. So I'll
Okay.
share that information with
I
you.
would love that. I would
But
love that.
before we go, I have two questions for you that I ask
Okay.
everybody. First is what is one book that you would recommend that our listeners read?
Oh. Okay, so I have a favorite ancient Hindu text called the Bhagavad Gita,
Hmm.
and it's basically the story between Krishna, which let's say is God, and Arjun, which is the warrior. And so it's a smaller reading out of a larger story, and it's their conversation, and it opens up on the battlefield. And
Hmm.
Arjun is on the battlefield and he's looking across at who he's about to fight and he sees family members and friends and he knows some will die. And it's this inner conflict that we have with ourselves on what our true dharma is, like our purpose, exactly what we were talking about. And so I always recommend that people read that book and find a translation that really resonates for you. Such an incredible story about purpose and dharma and what we're supposed to be doing in this world.
I love that
Yeah,
book.
I read it every
Wow.
year
For
in
a reason.
January. I pick
I
up
was
a new
just gonna say,
copy.
it's been probably 5 years for me. I need to read it again. Have to
Yeah,
pull
I
it
do
out.
almost a whole weekend of my teacher training on the Bhagavad Gita. I love
Nice.
it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so important. What is one thing you wish the world knew?
That each and every one of us deserves to be living a life that fucking like lights us up. It's
Amen, sister.
it's right here. It's available.
It's available. And I was just talking with another person. If everyone was living in alignment with what is their true purpose and who they're really here to be, it would be the world would seem so simple and easy, and a lot of our issues would go away, because when we're in that space, we wouldn't have jealousy
Right.
of someone else. We
So
wouldn't have
imagine that.
expectations, you know?
Yeah. We make things very complicated. Human
Mm-hmm.
beings make things really, really complicated, and life is really simple.
Yeah.
I think
Wow,
that's our
that's
biggest
a hard
reason.
lesson to learn.
It's a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. I have loved this conversation today.
Me
We're gonna have to do
too.
it again sometime.
Yes, let's keep in touch. I'm gonna have you come onto Becoming You when we relaunch in September, and we'll
Love
just definitely keep our conversations going. I feel like we could do this for a lot of hours.
I do too. I do too. I just want to tell our listeners how to reach you. So if you want to connect with Shirlee, you can reach her at Shirlee. It's Shirlee at Shirlee Williams with an S.com, or check out her Instagram, Shirlee Williams Living, which is very inspiring and
I
beautiful.
just changed it very quietly. It was Shirley Williams coaching for a really long time. And I realized it's so much more than a coach. But then you meet with business coaches and they're like, pick a niche, pick a thing, da da da. People are confused. And I'm like, fuck it. I do all the things and it's just living. So I've gone back to what works for me. There's no
I love
rules.
it. No, there's no rules, and your people will find you. Your people
Yes.
will resonate with your message. So, and I think that a lot of people will resonate with this today. So, thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really
Oh
love
my
this
gosh.
conversation.
I did too. I loved it. I'm gonna